Hello and welcome to our watercolor journey. Heinrich is going to show you step by step how to paint this beautiful little hummingbird. The paints and the brushes are listed below, and there's also a link to the drawing in the description below. Keep your paper flat because you don't want the paint to run, and you are going to paint all around the flowers and the bird. You can use masking fluid for the flowers and the bird if you want to, but this is actually a tutorial in the technique of using negative painting. So wet your paper all around. He's using the Art Secret number 10 mop, and make sure that it's really wet, and don't let any water get into the flowers and the bird. This is the Art Secret number 1, and this one is also very handy. These Art Secret mops hold a lot of water and a lot of paint, so with a minimum effort you can actually really do a lot of work. So he's using it to go right up to the stems, right up to the drawing, to make sure that everything is wet and everything is prepared for the background. Take care to wet between the flowers, because the sky is also going to shine through there. He's using Cobalt Blue, but you can also use cerulean or ultramarine. Cerulean is a little bit more granulating, so it will give an interesting effect, but in this case it's Cobalt Blue. Use a fairly watery mix and keep the brush strokes light. Try to work as fast as possible because your paper needs to stay wet. Make sure to paint in between the flowers, the sky shining through all of the open spaces. Many people have asked why he uses small brushes and so many light strokes to make the background. Well, you are actually using a very faint background in this case, and you're playing off the light against the dark. And the lighter background is going to make the little bird and the flowers stand out and give it a 3D effect. If you use a large brush to make the background in constant strokes, you are going to get a fairly uniform background, and there will be no interest, no variation. So he adds a little bit of color, and he uses the smaller brush just to vary the depth of the background so that it's not all just exactly the same shade. Now you're going to let your paper dry naturally. You can use a blow dryer, but if you've used masking fluid, then please don't, because masking fluid becomes tacky and difficult to remove when you use a blow dryer. So he's made a pre-mix of Sap Green and Lemon Yellow, and is using the Silver Black Velvet number 2 round to paint the first layer of the stems and the flowers. Now he's going to use a premix of burnt sienna and dioxazine violet to add some shade and texture to the stem and the leaves. adding a little bit of sepia to give a little bit more shade and texture to each of the leaves and the base of the flowers. Quinacridone Magenta to start painting the petals of the flowers, and the Quinacridone Magenta and the Sepia give a very interesting variation of color to these flowers, and together with the Dioxazine mix you can actually create quite a variety of shades in your petals and in the flowers. We would really like it and appreciate it if you would click like and subscribe to our channel, and please leave a comment, and if you have any suggestions we would love to hear about it. If you have some ideas for things that you want us to paint or to make a tutorial of, then please let us know in the comments below. Adding the neutral tint brings all these colors together and it gives the shadowing a new depth. Remember, shadows are never just plain black. They always reflect the base color of what they are shadowing. So don't ever use black, plain black, as a shadow. You can dab out if you find that you have used too much paint or too much pigment. Because this is basically a very wet type of painting, it's easy to dab out if you made a mistake. Watercolor can be forgiving. The star of this one is the Opera. Opera is a beautiful bright pink color. Leave plenty of white spaces and lighter spaces when you paint. It gives variation, it gives interest to your flower, and when you do the layering, it will help if everything is not just one uniform color. Adding the magenta while the Opera is still a little bit wet, so that it can diffuse into each other and flow and merge and just create the most magical colors. To allow the first few layers of the flowers to dry, he's now going to go over to the little bird and start painting the beak with neutral tint, using a very, very fine brush. In order to preserve the little sparkle in the bird's eye, he's just going to drop a teeny weeny bit of masking fluid onto the eye so that it will preserve the white of the paper when he paints the bird. Remember to use an old brush that was dipped in soap just to preserve the brush a little bit. Okay, so the paint on the flower is fairly dry, and now he is allowing the masking fluid to dry on the eye of the bird. So he's using an ERADICATOR brush. It is a brush with very short, hard hairs. It's a hog hair brush from Herend. Oh, lots and lots of H's. It's a hog hair brush from Herend. I feel like Audrey Hepburn in My Fair Lady in Hartford, Hereford, and Hampshire. Hurricanes hardly ever happen. Good grief. And he's using that to lift out some of the color in the leaves and the petals. Again, just to create the shading and variation and interest and some dimension and texture. So an ERADICATOR brush is actually a very amazing thing to use and to have in your toolbox. Because the hairs are fairly hard, you can easily damage the paper. So don't press too hard, just rub gently, and remember to dip the brush in water and rinse it regularly, or you might transfer paint from one area to another. Scrub lightly and dab out the excess paint or the excess water. So the masking fluid is dried and he's using neutral tint to paint the eye of the bird. He's also going to use the neutral tint to emphasize the feet and some other darker areas on the bird. Using a bit of sepia. Now he's going to paint the bird, so wet the bird completely with water, and this will allow you to make the paint fuse and disperse very nicely into each other. Be careful not to go onto the sky area, just wet inside the lines of the bird. He's going to start off by putting a first layer of raw sienna onto the bird. It is a fairly watery mix and it will disperse even more because the base is already wet. So don't make it too strong, just use a watery mix of the raw sienna. Here is just using a wet brush to coax the paint into the areas that he wants it to go. He also uses this to lighten the paint a little bit. Now, because this is your first layer, you are going to paint the birds in quite a few layers. So because this is the first layer, it is very, very light. He's lifting out a little bit of paint on the chest area because it has to be a lot lighter there and next to the feet. Then he's going to use a bit of burnt sienna to put the next layer up, just dabbing it in. Again, because the paint is still very wet, he's working wet on wet. He's dabbing it in and coaxing the paint to do its magic. It is so beautiful to see the paint just disperse like that. Watercolor is absolutely magic to work with. Using a wet brush to diffuse the paint, to soften the hard lines, to spread it out. And that forms your next layer. Now it's going to use burnt umber for the third layer. Everything is still wet, so dab it in very lightly. Next up is Sepia. Again, Sepia is there for the shadowing. Everything is still wet, so be very careful not to use too strong a mix because it will make hard lines and it will run all over the place. So keep it light. There is using a wet brush just to wet the chest area again and to move the paint around a little bit. This is now to start getting the area ready for more detail. Lifting out a little bit. When you lift out, you can wet the brush, make sure your brush is clean, and then dry the brush off on a towel. And you can dab out the areas where you need to lift the paint. Let the painting dry, and then you can start to get ready to add some more detail. He's using the Kum brush and starting with the sepia, adding little bits of detail to the bird to resemble the feathers and just to create the texture. He's using all the earth colors that he has there, the raw sienna, burnt sienna, the umber and the sepia, to start adding all the different textures and hues and tones into the bird to create this whole three-dimensional look that the bird has. Work very lightly, short strokes to create the feathery look. And the dark colors also help with the shape that you want to create. adding the shadowing is a very important part of your painting, and shadowing can be a little daunting. So take care when you use a reference photo. Look at it carefully. Study your picture to see where the lights and the darks are. Sometimes it's a good idea to print your picture out in black and white, or in grayscale rather, so that you can see the different tones or the different values of the paints, and that will help you to see where you have to paint the shadows, where you have to make the paint darker and lighter. So it's using the neutral tint to add the final shadows to the bird here. And it is a very tricky business, but if you take care and you work lightly, then you should be fine adding in the shadows where it needs to go. Just see how the few dark strokes of neutral tint defines the tail and the wings and the whole structure of the bird. Just adding a few strokes there to resemble loose feathers or feathers that are spread out a little bit. He has removed the glue or the masking fluid from the eye, and now he is just painting the eye a little bit clearer using the neutral tint again, being careful to leave the white spot. Finally, he's going to use a white pastel pencil to emphasize the highlights in the bird and in the flowers. This is a Faber-Castell pencil, and it works really, really well. Once you've used the pencil, you can use your finger or the silicone brush to just soften the strokes that you made with the pencil so that it fuses into the paint. Now we're going to remove the tape to reveal our beautiful painting. Pull the tape at an angle so that it doesn't tear your paper, and if it does get stuck, you can blow on it with a blow dryer on a warm setting to soften the glue. The white border makes it look like it has a frame, and it showcases your painting really beautifully. And there we have it. Thank you so much for joining our watercolor journey. See you soon.